What would you do if you discovered a secret facility, where humans are raised just like farm animals? A place where people are kidnapped, experimented on, and turned into food, far away from the outside world. And once you enter, there may be no way out. The story begins with a group of students enjoying a meal together in a restaurant. After finishing their food, they leave the place and board a bus that will take them back to their school. As the bus prepares to depart, there is a man outside who has set up a small stage. He is giving a speech about global warming. He explains that about 100 years ago, large portions of the Earth were suitable for human life, but now only a very small part of the planet remains livable. According to him, if humanity does not take serious action soon, the effects of climate change will continue to worsen, and put the future of the world in serious danger. Inside the bus, one of the students named Kazu listens to the speech, and begins thinking about another problem facing their country. He mentions that aside from environmental issues, the nation is also struggling with extremely low birth rates. In his opinion, the news constantly talks about how the world may soon collapse, and it feels like people hear nothing but bad predictions about the future. Sitting next to him is a boy named Lee, who becomes curious after hearing Kazu speak so seriously. Lee asks him whether he still plans to study science, even though everyone keeps saying the world might be nearing its end. Kazu answers confidently that he still plans to continue his studies. He explains that he wants to specialize in climatology, so that he can better understand the changes happening to the planet. Hearing this answer, Lee quietly closes his eyes for a brief moment, almost as if he is trusting the future of the world to Kazu's hands. However, when Lee opens his eyes again just seconds later, something frightening has already happened. Everyone else inside the bus has suddenly collapsed and fallen unconscious. Lee quickly realizes that he is the only student who remains awake. The reason soon becomes clear when he notices that he is still wearing a protective mask. The bus driver is also wearing a mask for safety, which is why he remains conscious as well. Kazu, on the other hand, panics when he notices that the driver seems completely fine. In confusion, he quickly removes his own mask, preparing to ask what is happening. But the moment the mask leaves his face, the world around him begins spinning uncontrollably. Within seconds, his body collapses, and everything fades into darkness. When Lee finally wakes up, he finds himself lying inside a large truck packed with many other people. As he slowly lifts his head and looks around, he notices a horrifying scene outside the vehicle. Many people are lying on the ground nearby, and their eyes appear completely lifeless. Workers are walking among them, carefully inspecting each person. After examining them, the workers place marks that categorize people based on their physical defects. Those who are labeled defective are taken to another area, where they are instructed to lie down facing upward. Once they are placed there, a conveyor system carries them into a large machine. When the bodies emerge from the other side, they are completely frozen. Afterward, the workers begin cutting them apart without hesitation. The entire situation leaves Lee completely shocked and confused, as he struggles to understand what kind of place he has been brought to. At that moment, the truck driver notices that Lee has woken up, and begins speaking to him. The driver appears surprised, explaining that the gas used earlier did not seem to work very well on him. Looking at Lee's young face, the driver even expresses a small amount of pity. He tells Lee that it is unfortunate someone so young has ended up in this place, and quietly explains that once someone arrives here, there is no possibility of leaving. The driver then tells Lee that he should prepare himself for what lies ahead. Lee immediately begins asking questions in panic. He wants to know where they are, and whether the humans being treated like livestock are actually real. He even asks if he is still in Japan, or somewhere completely different. After listening to these questions, the driver simply concludes that Lee must be a Type 2. Before Lee can ask what that means, a sudden sharp pain shoots through his shoulder. One of the workers has stabbed him with a long axe-like tool. Even though Lee screams in agony, the worker shows no sympathy at all. Instead, he drags Lee out of the truck, and throws him onto a rolling machine that begins carrying him downward through a long slope. As Lee continues rolling further down, he eventually sees something deeply disturbing waiting below. A large group of extremely overweight people are gathered there, standing beneath pipes that hang above them. They are all drinking a strange liquid that slowly drips down from the pipes. Shocked by the scene, Lee quickly turns around and looks upward, hoping to find a way to climb back up the path he came from. Unfortunately, the machine keeps moving downward without stopping, making escape impossible. He briefly considers using the handrails along the sides to climb upward, but he soon realizes they only extend halfway along the slope. Even if he tried climbing, the rails would eventually end and leave him with no way to continue. Realizing that escape is impossible, Lee begins observing the strange environment around him, wondering what exactly those people are drinking. While looking through the crowd, Lee suddenly notices a familiar face. To his shock, he sees Kazu standing among the others. Lee immediately rushes toward him. However, Kazu appears completely absorbed in drinking the liquid from the pipes. He seems so focused on it that he does not even notice Lee at first. Lee calls out to him several times, before Kazu finally looks in his direction. Lee urgently asks what is happening, and where they have been brought. Instead of answering, Kazu casually tells him not to worry about those questions. He simply offers Lee the pipe, suggesting that he should try the liquid as well. As the drops continue falling, Lee notices that the smell is similar to fruit. It almost resembles juice, and the scent makes him realize how thirsty he has become. Thinking it might simply be a drink, he slowly moves forward to grab the pipe. However, just before he can take hold of it, someone suddenly grabs him from behind. The man firmly warns Lee not to drink the liquid. He explains that although nobody knows exactly what the substance is, it completely destroys a person's will. Anyone who drinks it eventually loses themselves, and becomes someone entirely different. While the man speaks, Kazu continues offering the pipe without stopping. Seeing this, Lee struggles in the man's grip because he wants to save his friend. However, the man refuses to release him, tightening his hold even further. He demands that Lee hand over anything he might have that could help them contact the outside world. If Lee does not have any useful device, the man asks him to explain what the situation is like outside this place. The pressure from the man's grip becomes so strong that Lee begins struggling to breathe. Just as the situation becomes critical, another person suddenly arrives nearby. He calmly tells the man that losing his temper will not help anyone. He explains that letting the boy die would only make things worse. After hearing his words, the man finally releases Lee. The newcomer apologizes to Lee on behalf of him, gently explaining that the man is simply not very good at communicating with others. He then reveals something shocking about their situation. Both of them, he explains, are extremely exhausted and easily angered, because they have been trapped in this place for 3 days and 11 hours without eating anything. After explaining this, he finally introduces himself. His name is Yamabiki, and the man standing beside him is called Natsun. Once Lee introduces himself as well, he asks them the question that has been troubling him ever since he woke up. Yamabiki calmly looks at him, and finally reveals the terrifying truth. This place, he explains, is a breeding facility for humans. Yamabiki explains that he is not completely certain about the true purpose of the place. According to him, it is only a guess. He believes that this location could either be a breeding facility for humans, or a place where people are intentionally fattened. As soon as Lee hears the word fattened, he quickly understands what Yamabiki means. On farms, animals are often fed heavily so they grow larger before eventually being slaughtered. The realization that humans might be treated the same way fills Lee with fear. Overwhelmed by panic, Lee suddenly starts walking toward a large door nearby. Desperate to escape, he begins banging on it loudly while shouting for someone to open it. His actions draw immediate attention. Before he can do anything else, Natsun rushes forward from behind and punches him hard in the face. Lee collapses to the ground in pain. Natsun grabs him by the collar and angrily tells him that he has no idea how dangerous his actions could have been. Before Lee can even ask what Natsun means, they hear a loud noise approaching from outside. The sound grows closer with every passing moment. Natsun immediately realizes what is happening and quietly warns Lee that something terrible is coming. He urgently tells him not to turn around, no matter what happens. Just then, the door opens. At that moment, Lee finds himself sitting with the pipe in his mouth. Natsun had quickly instructed him to pretend that he was drinking from it if he wanted to survive. He also told Lee to act like someone who had completely lost his mind, and to never look behind him under any circumstances. While Lee tries to follow these instructions, he begins hearing strange noises around the room. The sound suggests that something is slithering across the floor. As the noise moves closer, a large antenna slowly passes in front of him. The sight makes Lee extremely curious about what kind of creature could be behind him. Even though he strongly wants to turn around and look, he forces himself to remain still, remembering Natsun's warning. The antenna is enormous, far larger than anything Lee has ever seen before. As he struggles to stay calm, something horrifying suddenly happens nearby. The creature suddenly slices a sleeping man in half. The shocking sight almost makes Lee lose control. For a brief moment, the pipe slips out of his mouth, but he quickly puts it back again. Some of the blood from the victim splashes onto Lee's head, yet he continues pretending as if nothing has happened. Soon, the full creature becomes visible. It is a gigantic caterpillar with a monstrous and disturbing face. After devouring the first man, the creature continues moving around the room, cutting and eating several others without hesitation. Lee sits frozen in fear, wondering if the monster will notice him next. As he waits, a smaller antenna slowly approaches him as well. Lee struggles to control the urge to scream, hoping the creature will ignore him and move on. During this terrifying moment, Lee glances toward Natsun. The sight is almost unbelievable. Hundreds of thin antennae have surrounded Natsun's body. Despite this, Natsun remains completely still, continuing to pretend that he is drinking from the pipe. The antennae do not just crawl over him. Some of them even enter his mouth and nose, yet Natsun does not react at all. He maintains the act perfectly. After a while, the antennae slowly withdraw and begin crawling away. With that, the massive caterpillar eventually leaves the room. Not long after the creature disappears, two workers enter the area to clean up the scene. They casually begin collecting the scattered body parts while talking to each other. One of them complains that the caterpillar is always such a messy eater. As they continue picking up the remains, one of the workers suddenly shows a hint of sympathy. He mentions that the people here were once normal individuals with families and ordinary lives, but now their fate is simply to wait until they are either eaten by the creature, or cut apart and stored in the freezer. While the worker is speaking, something unexpected happens. Someone suddenly grabs him from below, causing him to jump in shock. When he turns around, he sees Yamabiki standing behind him. Startled by the sight, the worker quickly backs away in confusion. Both workers are shocked, immediately questioning why a normal human is present in this area. One of them instantly attempts to attack Yamabiki. But Natsun rushes forward and punches him directly in the face. Before the workers can properly react, Yamabiki and Natsun force the pipes into their mouths. The strange liquid begins flowing inside them, and almost immediately, both workers become addicted to the substance. Their resistance disappears, they quietly sit down, completely absorbed in drinking it. With the workers now distracted, Yamabiki and Natsun quickly remove their clothes and put them on. By wearing the workers' uniforms, they plan to blend in with the staff of the facility and use the disguise to escape from the place. Lee quickly asks Yamabiki and Natsun if they are planning to escape from the facility. Yamabiki calmly replies that they intend to try. Hearing this, Lee immediately asks them to take him along, promising that he can help them and anxiously asking what he should do. Yamabiki simply points toward the group of overweight people drinking from the pipes, telling Lee to take a drink and make himself comfortable there. Lee refuses right away, explaining that drinking that liquid would only get him into serious trouble. Yamabiki smiles slightly and asks if it would really be that bad. He casually says that Lee could simply remain here forever if he wanted, and after saying that, he begins walking toward the door with Natsun. Watching them leave, Lee suddenly realizes something terrifying. If they abandon him here, he will have no chance of surviving on his own. In desperation, he quickly sits down on the ground and calls out to them. He asks if they actually know what is happening outside the facility. Lee points out that neither of them truly understands the structure of the place, yet they are planning to leave without any information. It turns out that Lee remembers everything he saw earlier while he was being transported. Using some of the blood scattered on the ground, he begins drawing a rough map of what he remembers seeing outside. Curious, both Yamabiki and Natsun come closer to look at the drawing. After examining it, Yamabiki smiles with interest and asks Lee if he has a photographic memory. He mentions that he has heard about such abilities before, but has never personally seen someone demonstrate it. He then asks Lee whether he remembers the layout of the entire place. Lee explains that ever since he was a child, he has been able to clearly visualize almost anything after seeing it only once. Because of this ability, he believes he might be the only person who even remotely remembers the path leading out of the facility. Lee jokingly adds that trying to escape without him would be like playing an RPG game without having a map. After hearing this, Yamabiki and Natsun briefly exchange looks, before finally deciding to take him along. However, they warn Lee that if they ever feel he is slowing them down, they will leave him behind without hesitation. With that decided, the group approaches the door. Using an access card they found on the worker's uniform, they manage to unlock it and step into the hallway outside. Once they are standing in the corridor, Yamabiki suddenly asks Natsun where Lee has gone. At that exact moment, Lee suddenly jumps out of the room again, dragging Kazu with him. Seeing this, Natsun immediately grabs Lee by the collar and angrily demands to know what he is doing. Lee insists that he cannot abandon his friend, saying that he is simply trying to save him as well. While the two of them continue arguing, two workers suddenly approach them in the hallway, questioning why they are standing outside. Yamabiki quickly steps forward and improvises a lie. He explains that the substance they used earlier did not work properly on these two people. One of the workers looks confused when he hears the word substance, but before he can ask for clarification, Yamabiki quickly corrects himself and calls it a solution instead. Hearing this explanation, the workers assume that Lee and Kazu must be scheduled for disposal. Yamabiki immediately agrees with their assumption. The workers then tell them to stop wasting time, instructing them to bring the two men to the proper location. As the workers lead them further down the corridor, the group suddenly notices something disturbing ahead. Several men are being dragged through the hallway while bound with heavy chains. The sight leaves them visibly shocked. One of the workers notices their reaction and casually asks if they have never seen a breeder before. When they admit that they have not, the worker assumes they must be new employees in the facility. Suddenly, the worker gets an idea and tells Yamabiki and Natsun to follow him, promising to show them something amusing. Yamabiki simply smiles and agrees to go with him. As they walk behind him, Yamabiki quietly observes the worker's hand, noticing that he is subtly forming an SOS signal with his fingers. After walking for a short distance, they reach a large area filled with cells where many women are locked inside. The moment the women notice the men approaching, they begin shouting loudly and calling out to them. Some try desperately to attract attention, begging the men to come closer and interact with them. At that moment, one of the workers points toward a woman whose teeth appear to have mostly fallen out. He asks Yamabiki how old he thinks she is. Yamabiki studies her carefully and guesses that she might be around 50 years old. The worker then reveals something shocking. The woman is actually only 18. Yamabiki is stunned by the revelation, struggling to believe that someone so young could appear so aged. The worker continues explaining that the woman has a special talent in this facility. According to him, she has already given birth to 20 children despite being only 18 years old. The facility provided her with certain substances that made such extreme reproduction possible. While they are still processing this disturbing information, the worker suddenly gives one of the chained men a strange drug. The moment it takes effect, the man begins behaving like a wild beast consumed by uncontrollable urges. The worker then throws the man into the woman's cell and locks the door behind him. He explains that the drug will drive the man until his body completely gives out. The worker proudly boasts that the facility produces all kinds of powerful substances like these, claiming that their control over such drugs is the reason no one dares to challenge them. Hearing this, Lee suddenly loses his temper. He rushes forward and grabs the worker by the collar, demanding to know who is responsible for creating such drugs. The worker responds by punching Lee directly in the face. Before the situation can escalate further, Yamabiki suddenly steps in. He calmly tells the worker to relax, and then unexpectedly injects him with the very same drug he had just used earlier. Without hesitation, Yamabiki and Natsun drag both workers into an empty cell and lock the door behind them. Soon the drug begins affecting one of the workers, driving him into a violent and uncontrollable state. Now trapped inside the cell, he begins behaving wildly even toward his own colleague. After securing the cell, Yamabiki begins explaining what they have just witnessed. He points out the supercaloric syrup that the overweight people were drinking earlier, explaining that it can addict a person after just a single taste. Then there is the drug that forces the heart into extreme overdrive, causing someone to lose their sanity almost instantly. He admits that he has never encountered substances like these before. Judging by the scale of the operation and the power of these drugs, he begins to suspect something disturbing. The group running this facility might be far larger and more powerful than a single organization could manage on its own. After hearing Yamabiki's earlier statement, Lee asks him what exactly he means. Yamabiki calmly tells him to think about the scale of everything they have seen so far. Lee says he already understands that the facility is large, but he still does not understand the point Yamabiki is trying to make. Yamabiki then gestures toward the man inside the cell who had been injected with the strange drug earlier, crudely remarking about the unnatural intensity the drug has created in him. At that moment, Natsun suddenly opens the cell door. He pushes aside the man who has been driven wild by the drug, and grabs the other man who had been thrown inside earlier. The victim is already in terrible pain, but Natsun shows no sympathy. He demands to know whether there is any way to save the women trapped in the cells. The man responds with a strange question, asking them if they have ever heard of a bird hatching from a boiled egg. Without waiting for their answer, he explains it himself. According to him, even if the women somehow manage to escape from this place, their fate would already be sealed. After everything they have gone through here, their lives are effectively ruined, and sooner or later, they would die anyway. Natsun hears this and becomes furious. He punches the man in the face before turning away and leaving the cell. The moment he walks away, the man affected by the drug takes the opportunity to act on his uncontrollable urges and continues attacking the other prisoner. While this chaos continues behind them, Lee and the others suddenly notice a terrible smell spreading through the hallway. When they look ahead, they see a woman slowly walking toward them while holding a small child in her arms. The child appears lifeless, and his tiny body is covered in flies. As the woman approaches them, she begins shouting, asking someone to take the baby from her. She speaks as if she is talking to someone who is not there. She asks if he remembers how excited they once were about their child. She recalls how they had dreamed about taking their baby to an amusement park someday, repeating the promise that was once made to her. The woman continues speaking to the imaginary person, reminding him that he once said it did not matter whether their baby was a boy or a girl, as long as the child was born healthy. Then she lifts the baby slightly, saying that the child looks just like him. The flies swarm so heavily around the infant that his face can barely be seen. The woman slowly steps closer and asks them again to hold the baby. Lee and Yamabiki instinctively begin stepping back, unable to face the horrifying sight. Natsun, however, calmly walks toward the woman instead. He gives her a faint smile and softly thanks her, speaking to her gently as if she were someone familiar. Then he pulls her closer and kisses her. While doing this, he remembers the worker's earlier words about a bird hatching from a boiled egg. In the next moment, Natsun suddenly snaps the woman's neck, ending her life instantly and sparing her further suffering. He gently lowers her body to the ground, closes her eyes, and quietly offers a short prayer for her. After that moment passes, Yamabiki begins speaking again about the situation they are facing. He points out that the facility clearly represents something far larger than a simple underground operation. There are too many strange things happening here for it to be the work of a small organization. At first, Yamabiki suspects that some criminal group might be running a human farming operation to harvest organs and sell them on the black market. However, that theory does not explain everything, especially the existence of the enormous caterpillar-like creature roaming the facility. Yamabiki begins wondering aloud what that monster might actually be. Before he can continue the thought, Lee suddenly interrupts him. Lee insists that he does not want to know anything about that creature. All he wants is to escape from this nightmare as quickly as possible. At that moment, Natsun finishes his prayer and stands up again. The first thing he announces is that he is not planning to leave yet. According to him, there is something he still needs to do before escaping. Lee immediately protests, arguing that they should focus on getting out of the facility first and deal with everything else later. Yamabiki then questions Lee's urgency. Instead of appearing frightened, Yamabiki speaks with an unusual curiosity about the place. He asks Lee whether he does not find something strangely fascinating about the facility. Yamabiki even describes the place as almost beautiful in its own twisted way. According to him, it offers experiences that people could never encounter in the ordinary outside world. Because of that, he wonders why anyone would want to return to the boring life they had before. Hearing this strange reasoning makes Lee realize something disturbing. There might be something seriously wrong with both Yamabiki and Natsun. Just then, Kazu suddenly shouts and points toward a distant area. He excitedly calls for the others to come over and see what he has discovered. Saying that he has found something incredible, Kazu runs toward the direction he indicated. The others quickly follow behind him. When they arrive at the location, they find themselves staring at something enormous and very strange. None of them can immediately understand what they are looking at. They begin walking around the massive structures, trying to figure out their purpose. After observing them for a moment, Natsun suddenly points upward toward the ceiling and asks the others what those objects above them could possibly be. Above them, numerous screens are attached to the ceiling. Each screen displays the same short message, but in many different languages. The message simply reads, "Hello, how are you?" While Yamabiki studies the ceiling and the strange displays, Lee begins examining the large mysterious structures surrounding them. As he places his hand against one of them, he suddenly freezes for a moment. Natsun immediately notices the change in Lee's expression and asks him what happened. Lee explains that he just felt something move inside the structure he touched. The sensation was faint, but he is certain that something living is inside it. Before they can discuss it further, Yamabiki suddenly notices movement nearby, quickly telling both of them to stay quiet. Moments later, several workers enter the room carrying equipment and an unfamiliar device. They briefly scan the area, but since Natsun and the others are carefully hiding, the workers fail to notice anything unusual. From their hiding place, Lee and the others watch closely, wondering what the workers are doing. One of the workers approaches one of the massive structures and uses a strange machine to take readings from its surface. After that, they open a laptop and begin checking data on the screen. Yamabiki observes the equipment carefully, quietly remarking that the device looks similar to a durometer, a tool commonly used to measure the hardness of materials. Meanwhile, the workers begin cleaning the structures with extreme care. They wipe every surface thoroughly, making sure not even a tiny speck of dust remains. Natsun and the others find this level of caution unusual. As Yamabiki watches more closely, he notices that the workers all seem tense and nervous, as if they are afraid something might happen at any moment. Suddenly, one of the workers accidentally makes a loud noise while moving the equipment. For a brief moment, nothing happens, and everyone continues working as if everything is normal. Then, without warning, one of the massive structures is suddenly pierced from inside by something sharp. The moment the workers notice this, panic spreads through the room. They immediately begin running toward the exit while shouting that it is hatching. However, when they reach the door, they realize it has been locked. Desperate, they begin shouting and banging on the door, begging someone outside to open it. But no answer comes. In the middle of the chaos, a drop of blood suddenly falls onto one of the workers' faces. Confused, he slowly turns around. Behind him stands a horrifying creature. A large monstrous hand has already torn the skin from one of the workers nearby. Lee, Natsun, and Yamabiki watch the scene in complete shock as the creature reveals itself. After ripping away the victim's skin, the monster opens its grotesque mouth and begins feeding on the body. Seeing this horrifying sight, another worker begins running through the room in panic, repeatedly shouting apologies and begging for forgiveness. While trying to escape, the terrified man suddenly trips and falls to the floor. At that moment, something even more disturbing happens. The monster suddenly begins repeating the exact same words the worker had been shouting. In a strange and unsettling voice, it echoes the phrases again and again. "No, excuse me. I'm sorry." The creature continues repeating those words while slowly approaching him. Hearing his own voice echoed back at him, the worker became furious and terrified at the same time. He shouts at the creature, demanding that it stop mocking him by copying his words. But before he can say anything else, the monster suddenly lunges forward. With a single brutal movement, it tears the man's skin from his body as well. Watching the monster devour another human right in front of them leaves Lee, Natsun, and Yamabiki completely horrified, frozen in fear as the nightmare unfolds before their eyes. Lee realizes that as long as the monstrous creature remains in the room, they are effectively trapped. The thought that it might stay there for hours makes panic rise inside him. His heart begins racing, his breathing grows shallow, almost loud enough to give away their hiding place. Suddenly, a massive hand slams against the metal door in front of them. The monster effortlessly tears the door apart, its sheer strength overwhelming. Lee feels a surge of terror as the creature reaches toward him. In his mind, he imagines the worst, the monster tearing him in half. The fear becomes so intense that he nearly makes a sound. Natsun immediately notices the movement and hisses at him to remain completely silent. As they watch, the monster continues feeding on the humans around the room. Lee begins sweating heavily, droplets forming on his face and threatening to fall to the floor. Before even a single drop can hit the ground, Yamabiki calmly catches it between his fingers. Lee stares at him in disbelief. Seeing Yamabiki act with such confidence gives him a small spark of hope, making him believe that staying close to Yamabiki and Natsun might be his only chance of surviving this nightmare. Just as Lee tries to steady his nerves, a loud growl suddenly erupts from Yamabiki's stomach. The sound echoes through the room. The monster immediately turns its attention toward them. Natsun grits his teeth in frustration, muttering a curse at Yamabiki under his breath. Yamabiki quickly apologizes, explaining that the gruesome sight of the monster eating humans somehow made him hungry. The creature slowly approaches the door again, its presence filling the air with tension. With terrifying ease, it tears the door away completely.